Prioritizing strategic autonomy above international commitments, while at the same time we see a lot of crisis emerging in terms of climate and energy. And tied to this all is an absolutely global issue, global food security. Shouldn't we invest more in security measures? And that's the question that's central to the debate of today. To what extent should investments in global food security be part of countries' security policies? I'm going to discuss this with a panel of experts. We have about half an hour. And the second half, I'm going to discuss this with, hopefully potential members of Dutch Parliament in the future. And they will share their reflections on this issue. My name is Ellen Magnus, and as clear, I will moderate this session. Thanks a lot, and applause to three important expert guests. The first one is Sjoukje Hemovora, President of the Executive Board of Wageningen University. Then I also would like to call Henry Oshie to the floor. Yes, Henry. Program Manager of Oxfam Nigeria. And Freek Vossenaar. Freek, where are you? Thanks. Strategic Advisor, Food and Agri at the Hague Center of Strategic Studies. Welcome. Welcome to this panel. Freek, I'm going to start with you. Yeah. Yes. Could you reflect on how current power shifts into a multipolar world are affecting food security worldwide?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, I think we all know that the drivers for food insecurity are like economic shocks, war and conflict, and climate change. And there's no shortage of these three factors, leading to, in many areas, to a worsening situation of food security. In particular, I think we should worry about what is happening in Africa. And if you see now how trade is being disrupted and how countries are penalized by, in particular we shouldn't mention him too often this morning, but I guess the President of the United States and his particular policies, then that is severely disrupting trade, and it is severely disrupting production. I mean, trade is usually a kind of stabilizing mechanism, so shortages can be overcome. But also production, is hampered by the fertilizers, the seeds, all kinds of tariffs leading to disruptions. And we still have to see how that works out. I mean, this is still rather new. And usually, countries will have to adapt, but in a way that does not bear well for food security.
That's what you currently observe, because couldn't you say that this power shift also leads to new opportunities? Maybe other countries stepping in, and what do they
offer?
I
don't know whether that would lead to opportunities, maybe in the short term for one country that can increase exports to another country. But all in all, I think it's just bad news. And next to all these trade issues, climate change is also advancing. I think it was this morning, or was it yesterday, a situation in Iran without water, Syria, the day before yesterday, the newspapers. I mean, a lot of areas in the world where the situation is worsening and conflict. I think we're very short. I'm very curious to hear what the politicians will say later, but we're very short-sighted by not connecting food insecurity and war and conflict and all that it means for food security to our agenda of anti-immigration and security defense. I think we should really bear in mind that these are connected. Maybe not from today to tomorrow, but fundamentally they are connected, and in the long run it will have its implications.
Thanks. I'm going to ask a similar question to you and Henry. So first, Henry, from a Nigerian perspective, how are these shifting panels of geopolitical power, as well as the declining aid budgets, affecting food security in your country's context, especially the vulnerable population?
All right. Thank you very much. So for Nigeria, that was in 2020. As at 2011, our budget from aid constitute around 9% of the current budget in that year. And most of those budgets actually came from USAID and some other donor agencies from Europe. And so during that year, the country actually invested that 9% into what they call strategic projects, which include food security and all of that. But beyond that, what we see today is the decline in these kinds of aid coming to Africa, basically. And if you look at the percentage of the aid coming to Africa, a chunk of it comes to Nigeria. And looking at some of these policies like the USAID policy ending and all of that, it has drastically shrunk the kinds of budget that comes to finance some of these strategic projects. Basically, right, but again, what we also tell or advocate for our governments locally is for them to begin to look more inwards here, to strategically, do their budget, because what we also say is that when you look at the budget, that's where you look at, you begin to look at how countries prioritize their people, yeah? So the numbers you see across different lines of the budget, say education, say health, say agriculture, say infrastructure, and defense, that's where you begin to look at, to see how a country prioritizing their own people. So yesterday I was looking at some research, and I see how, for example, the Netherlands, in the NATO bloc, they are like the seventh biggest investor in defense. Yeah? And you look at some reports from the WHO, they're saying that what NATO is investing in defense is equal to the amount they want to end world hunger. Yeah. So some of these statistics, when you look at it, you also want to look at trade in that sense. So the volume of trade between Africa and Europe, for example, sits around 64% thereabout. So you also want to look at what are those things that constitute those trade. So within Africa, you have a paltry sum percentage of 16% trade amongst African countries. But between Africa and Europe, it's as high as 60-something%. So if you look at the constituent of what constitutes the trade between Africa and Europe, you see that it's mostly either raw materials coming from Africa to Europe or Africa importing defense force or defense technology down to Europe. Just this year, our government in Nigeria have imported or invested in defense to the tune of, say, up to 16% of the budget. Yeah.
So you actually plea for like a shift. They should prioritize.
Yes.
Own food.
Yes. So if you compare that with the investment in agriculture, it's 1.9%. Yeah. So compare 1.9% to 16%. That's a whole difference, right? So that's where you begin to see how a nation is supposed to prioritize their own people in terms of budget system.
Thanks a lot. Freek, do you see, is this indeed the decline of, let's say, traditional aid or development aid, is that affecting hunger?
Yeah, well, if you look at what is happening, I think last year, the budgets, well, US aid, of course. Well, first of all, in the official, in the ODA, a small percentage is spent on food and agriculture. I think the US aid budget was 5% was dedicated to agriculture. So that dropped out to a large extent. But also the UK, Switzerland, France, Germany, so many countries reduced their budget for development aid. Astonishing. And then you see a lot of money also moving towards Ukraine, which is also counted in many ways as development aid. So. Yeah, and then, you had the NATO summit in The Hague, not far from here. So now we're going to spend 5% of our GDP on security and defense. And 1.5% of that can be earmarked as security related. Now there's where that will be a festival of creative bookkeeping, because many countries have different ideas about this. And if you look at especially around the Mediterranean, Spain, Italy, those countries really want to spend some of that 1.5% on climate resilience. Yeah. And really, I think it's really short-sighted. And we can discuss whether it is sensible to spend 3.5% of our GDP on war equipment, whatever. I don't know. But that 1.5%, not to have a good look at food security and the strategic objective of food security in the long term, it would be very short-sighted if we wouldn't. And if you compare it, for example, to how the Chinese look at food security. Of course, they are a huge importer, but how they give strategic importance to food security, we can really learn something from how the Chinese are tackling this issue. And yeah, I think we are. We should really have a discussion and about the 1.5% first of that 5% that we will spend on security and defense issues.
Thanks, Sjoukje. You triggered me enormously with your presentation at the NAVO side top. Because, of course, oftentimes, if we follow a bit the political debates, it seems as if it's one or the other. It seems as if it's Europe, food secure, or do we invest in food security elsewhere? Your presentation sketched a different picture, or you showed that, well, European food security doesn't have to, constrain food security elsewhere. Can you elaborate upon this?
Yeah, well, thank you for this question. If it's about Europe or the Netherlands, we can easily, apart from social factors, we can easily be food secure. We produce enough food. It will be a trouble with coffee or avocado, but we can easily produce enough food. We feed ourselves and we export. So there, the whole debate about food security in Europe is a bit of fact-free in a way. What is insecure in European food security is our dependency on feed, fertilizer, and energy. So those are the issues we should address. And addressing those, we also address our impact on climate change. So this is a win-win.
Because there we are dependent on countries outside Europe, on food, like I said, food, feed, energy.
Yeah, so we import feed, mainly from South America, fertilizer, mainly from Morocco, Belarus, and energy. And if we, those are also the factors impacting climate most. So here we have a win-win. So that was the story I told in the NAVO side top. So if we want to be food secure, if we want to geopolitically secure, then we should think about diminishing those three dependencies, because otherwise we are food secure.
Yeah, and indeed that also leads to a more sustainable food system and hopefully less, well, let's say a less bigger footprint, which we have, of course.
Yes,
in
it
Europe.
would.
Yeah.
But of course, we should realize that this has social implications, because this is not pain-free.
Yeah.
If we want to be less dependent on feed and fertilizer and energy, we have to change our system. Not for the worse, but it will be different. We will have to eat less protein. We eat too much. We eat double the protein we need here in the western part of the world, in Europe. It's not healthy. It's not sustainable. We eat too much animal proteins. Yeah. We over-fertilize in certain areas, whereas in other parts of the world, they really need fertilizer. So it is not pain-free, but
yeah. Interesting. And I'm going to follow up here, because yesterday there was a conference in Wageningen as well on the seed sector. And it stood out how much of these, well, let's say international relations were also related to people working in the seed industry having studied in Wageningen or having studied in the Netherlands. And we also discussed that, well, the current shifts we see is not only a budget cut on development aid, but also a budget cut on, well, finance for scholarships, for academic institutions. Do you see in these, well, let's say global shift, there's still a role for, let's say, European institutes to play in food security elsewhere? Do we have a responsibility there? Can we fill a gap that's been left by development?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to this. On the one hand, it's about knowledge and knowledge-enhanced talent moving around. And we do have knowledge which we should share with the world, but the rest of the world has knowledge which we should want to integrate in our knowledge. So I think this international investment in knowledge development and in interaction and in exchange of knowledge management is really, really important. And that is not in the current state of politics. There's a sort of behind the dikes feeling with many parties, and it won't help. It won't help us. The fact that people say, look, you should not have all these international students, we need those to share our knowledge, but we also need, and our international colleagues, we also need them to gain knowledge. If you see the investment in sustainable agriculture in China, it's immense. Yeah. We need that knowledge, and we need to give them ours. We need to exchange. That will bring the world further. So that is one thing that we really should, that I really worried about on the current state of thinking. And the other thing, which I also would like to stress, is the importance of science diplomacy. Because just like you said, scientists, for example, from Wageningen, they go all over the world. I know we have an alumnus here who has been a diplomat, but we have the current Secretary General of the FAO as an alumnus, and many ministries all around the world as an alumnus. This is diplomacy we need, to have these lines. And science is one of the together with culture, I think, one of the lines you can always use to have a connection between peoples when we urgently need it. And I know that science diplomacy is an underestimated factor, and especially the Netherlands can use that dearly, and especially the agricultural science diplomacy can be used more than we do now.
Thanks. Yeah, to follow up on this, indeed, I was in Ghana, also an embassy fellowship, very nice, with the Dutch embassy, and I was shocked actually to see the number of Ghanaians that were were receiving scholarships to Russia, to Turkey, to Southeast Asia. I thought, wow, that's indeed, like you said, there's a shift ongoing. I'm moving back to you, Freek, because we also had a question for you in mind. Do you see indeed like countries like Russia and China already stepping in let's say, contributing to food security initiatives in Africa, wherever you are?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Of course, the Chinese, I already mentioned them, how strategically they think about a lot of things they will need now and in the future. And food is certainly one of those issues. Their Belt and Road initiative is largely was developed to make sure that they have a good supply of anything they need, raw materials, but also food. They build a lot of infrastructure to facilitate the imports, and they acquire land and companies and that kind of thing. I think the Russian involvement is more like taking related to governance in the Sahel area, Mali, Chad, Niger, Congo, a lot of countries, Guinea, a lot of countries where the Russian influence is expanding. I don't think for them it's so much food security. Russia is still a very large producer of almost everything, but for the Chinese it's definitely different. And they use the vacuum that, we're kind of retreating from Africa, and the Chinese happily fill that space.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Henry, we're now talking about indeed security, food security, and security policies at a quite high level, abstract level. But of course, well, your country is experiencing also, has a lot of areas that experience deep insecurity. How does contributing to food security in such unsafe areas, how can that look like? What is needed from... Indeed, we're talking about countries strategically investing in food security elsewhere, but what from an NGO perspective would this entail, and how do you look at this discussion?
So there's a whole lot of insecurity in Nigeria, which is actually born from the fact that there's already food insecurity. Yeah. And so, because there's less investment in food security, it's leading to a whole lot of other kinds of civil unrest in the country. And so the Boko Haram is there, the banditry is there, and the ISIS are there. They're just devastating the entire northern axis of the country. And so some of the conversation is with government is to look at what they call the kinetic and non-kinetic models of dismantling those insecure areas. And so you want to look at what some of us are proposing in country to say, why don't we look at the civil dimension in terms of investing in ensuring that young people have employment, farmers have access to improved seeds and inputs to be able to go back to their farms, and then the farms are also secure for them to go back to eventually. And for those who are in the IDP camps also, who are now returning back to their homes, are able to also have access to their farms and their farmlands again. But that's not exactly what we are seeing. And so the conversation is to begin to talk to government to invest more. So 1.89% is not enough to fix all of the agricultural sector. But again, when you look at the numbers again in the rural communities, where most of the food we produce and eat comes from, yeah, it's so high. 70% of our population lives in the rural area. So why don't you prioritize those people eventually to say, okay, invest more rather, maybe put in up to 10% Maputo Declaration agreement into that particular area where you know that there are more people living. That would already, cushion that effect, and also, push back those who are already thinking of, who are already vulnerable to maybe being recruited by bandits or by terrorists or ISIS and all of that. So it's the civil dimension that we talk about, what they call the non-kinetic, yeah? To see that, yeah, people have access to all the facilities and all the essential services or amenities that they need that will dissuade them from even thinking about terrorism and insecurity.
So you actually say that
yes,
investing in food security might also be a kind of, indeed, protection for further insecurity.
That's right,
and
absolutely.
Indeed, decrease the need to invest in defense.
Absolutely. And that also takes us to the interest of the global north in Africa. Beyond the crude oil, beyond the raw materials for energy transition, what are the alternatives, yeah? And what should African country begin to look at, yeah? Beyond crude, beyond beyond all the raw materials.
Do you see they're already investing in it? Do you see a shift?
Well, I don't see a shift for now, basically, because what I see now is the not just going after the raw material that they want, and that constitutes some of the exports that you get from out of Africa, right? So how should we be deliberate enough to see that we explore those raw materials? Like again, Netherlands, like you mentioned, don't quite need, because you're already food sufficient, right? So you will not ordinarily import food. So, but what are those things that you will import? So when you're importing those things out of Africa, for example, how do you also prioritize the interests of Africa in your deals and the importation that you carry out from Africa? Say, for instance, you're importing maybe crude. Yeah. So how do you also ensure that the extraction of crude from the ground is as sustainable as well as also ESG compliance, environment, social, and governance compliance, such that the environment is not as degraded as we see currently in the Niger Delta, where people or farmers can no longer have access to their land because the lands are degraded. They can't plant. When you put the seed in the ground, it doesn't grow because it's completely destroyed by the activities of crude oil explorers. Yeah. So these are some of the conversations that maybe when our government and your government sit together to go into treaties and deals, they're able to put at the table to ensure that the eventual beneficiaries of these deals are the people, the citizens, that they are the first persons that they think of when they go into those kinds of pacts.
Thanks. Yes, so the Global North has a responsibility as well, yes. We still have 10 minutes, and I want to actually give also space to the audience to ask questions to one of the panel members. Now, you were willing to walk around, right, with a mic? Anyone? I see.
Hello, my name is Saskia. I work for the Slow Food Youth Network, and my question is about when we are contributing to global food security, we have to manage carefully the processes of decolonization. And how can we keep that in mind whilst we continue to trade? How do we actually make sure that we don't continue these colonial relations?
Thank you very much. You have the question to a particular panel member, or you want everyone to reflect on it? Any of you wanting to reflect on this?
So yes, so decolonizing trade, for me, also decolonizing the kinds of transaction that goes on between the global north and the south, especially with regards to food. Yes, so a couple of months ago, we were in the communities and we were talking to farmers, and they said that there are some seed technology that has come to them that is destroying their livelihoods completely, making them dependent on the entrepreneurs and the researchers and the developers of those kinds of seed. And so they are of the opinion that they want to rely on their own ancestral seeds. They want to depend on the seed that they know that they have been planting over the years, that their own fathers or mothers pass on to them. And so they try to preserve those kinds of seed because they don't trust the kinds of technology, seed technology that is coming to them. One of them said that they planted one of those seeds in their farms, and the following year they could not plant their natural seed anymore. So two things, seed colonization and seed monopoly. Monopoly in the sense that you're continually dependent on the producers of those kinds of seed. So how do we detach from that? Such that seed are more natural, they can be preserved, they can be used again, they can reproduce by themselves without necessarily depending on the producers. And most times, the producers of those seeds are from the global north, right? So yes, there's need to look at this, because seed, again, is really important. It's really important because...
But Henry? Yeah, I totally agree. Aren't you, because I think you're also pointing to the current turbulent situation we are in. Aren't you afraid that this is actually being, put aside for all the other priorities, strategic thinking we're currently witnessing? Sjoukje, if you want to respond, please go ahead. Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, because talking about this seed example and about decolonization, if we look to the history, we have taken big steps in production increasement by new technologies, new genetics, new knowledge. And it has been good in some places and it has been bad in others because we didn't take along the local knowledge and the local needs enough. So this is, I think, where decolonization has a role to play, and this is what is currently happening, not everywhere, not always, but we are working more and more towards balanced partnerships where you work together on what you need, what you want in a certain area, and what fits and what is the local knowledge, and exchange this knowledge with the knowledge we have on new varieties, which can close this yield gap, because there is still a huge yield gap in Africa, in certain parts of Asia, and we will need to close it to feed, especially Africa. The population is growing, so we will need to close that yield gap. And we can feed South Africa, the sub-Saharan Africa can feed itself perfectly if they close this yield gap. And I think we need both all the knowledge we have in the world in working together. But this is not about bringing knowledge there, bringing seeds there, but working together on what do we know, what do we have, what do you know, what do you have. And this is the way we need to work going forward, I feel.
Actually a nice message
may
to
I
the
add
politicians.
2 examples to that?
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
There's, of course, we want to, we have many objectives in our international relations, but I think when the deforestation regulation of directive was made in the EU, what was the effect on the smallholders who had some palm or oil palm, never taken into account? And we look at these things from a very straight objective. When we discussed gas from Algeria, we never took into account that they wanted knowledge about dairy. No, that's a different department. No, we have a fair and open relation with Algeria. We want something from them, they want something from us. Yeah, please connect it. And don't treat it as a separate issue. Same with that deforestation directive. Very noble in its meaning, but the consequences originally for smallholders never taken into account.
Thanks. Someone else? Oh, I see fingers. Good. Yeah.
Oh, me? Okay. Oh, you're going to hold it? Okay. Hi, my name is Thomas Fischer. I work at Wageningen University. So it's a cliche, we live in interesting times, but it does seem to me like we're going through this massive shift, sort of SDGs on the one hand, geopolitical change on the other, right? That's this big picture that we're talking about. And we don't know what we're leaning into. But as the lady sort of mentioned, some people are saying that actually there was a hypocrisy to the aid, right? Because we had aid on the one hand and sort of unfair trade relations on the other. This feels, for a lot of global South, folks, and I don't speak on behalf of Global South, this is what I'm reading, it's a bit more of a fair and honest conversation that's been had now, because geopolitics and rivalry was always shaping the bigger picture. So I know the gentleman from ISS said in the short term this is a problem, food security, but I'd be curious to hear from any or all of you, if you put yourself 4 or 5 years from now, what would you want the geopolitics to look like? And with less hypocrisy and maybe more honesty, but also from a collective perspective, not just from a nationalistic security perspective. Thank you.
Nice, thanks for this question. Yeah. Henry, you want to start? An aid-free, but
so
equal
I just want to share an example with you, right? So my kind of work allows me to do program development for the office. And so we were going for this particular opportunity, and the precondition was that you have to work with a company, with a private sector company that has registration in the parent country. So we sat back and brainstormed. We could not find, at the time, we could not find any private sector company with that kind of partnership with us. So we lost out. And now, we're not trying to see how we can begin to look at, maybe developing some kind of partnership with those kinds of companies, because it seems as though most of the calls and most of the proposals and most of the opportunities are tied to you working with a company that has registration in that parent country. So that's the trend now. And it will drastically affect, development aid to the Global South. And that's another form of colonization. Yeah, because you're giving the money this way and you're taking it the other way. Because you want your company to be the one to lead in all of those aid implementation. So how do we talk about decolonization, and yet we're still tying aid to you working with a company registered in your parent country?
So your
Just
future,
one part of your question, sorry.
in your desired future, that won't happen anymore.
So in my desired future, right, if you really want to decolonize, then decolonize, right?
Thanks a lot. We're going to finalize the panel with this nice sentence. We can continue for hours. But we're eager to learn also from the reflections of the parliamentary members. I'm really grateful for your contribution and reflections. So let them give an applause. And then thanks a lot. Thank you all. Yeah. Thanks a lot. So we're now, continuing with the second half of this session. I want to ask to the floor Fatima Belrich from D66, Danielle Hisch, and Alice. Yes, there you are. Sorry, the lights, I couldn't see you. Welcome. Thanks, wherever you feel comfortable. Welcome. Very nice that you are joining us. And we are, of course, eager to learn from your reflections. I've prepared some questions, but Oh, sure. Sorry, I didn't even offer it. Oops. Water. Yeah, sorry.
Just for everybody, we have been doing debates together, the three of us, for the past 2 weeks, and it's really enjoyable. Oh. I hope this is a good reflection of what the election results will be. So just so you know, we have nice conversation.
Ja. Overleg even wat zij willen. Ja. Ik ga even jullie eerst een andere vraag stellen. Deze sessie was gepland in het Nederlands. Als jullie comfortabel zijn met het Engels, kunnen we ook voortgaan in het Engels. Yeah, it's okay in English, and if you feel more comfortable, talk English. Then the second half will also be in English if the audience also agrees. Yeah, sure. So you already know each other, and you're already tuned. Yeah, recording. Nice. Okay, Alice. So the current cabinet has drastically cut in development aid, and if we might believe the program of CDA, you're advocating for agreeing with the norm as was previously. Why do you think that's necessary? Can you elaborate upon that?
Well, we still have the ambition to invest, to go back into within steps, to go back to the 0.7%.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to still have that ambition. And we agreed upon the norm in the years 1970, so that's long ago. And I think it's very important to keep that in sight, because we see that geopolitical conflicts, and I think it's very important to see that you still need development aid and not only defense. And I think that's...
But is it then a moral ambition or a strategic choice?
Well, I think it's both. And I think it's very important to say that it's not only because of us. I think you see some of the right-wing parties currently only looking inwards, only wanting to invest in development aid because if it's in our own interest. And I think it's also solidarity. I really believe that it's our duty to invest and to assist the poor, because we see at this moment that there are 300 million people that have food insecurity all over the world. And I think it's not only in our own interest, but in a moral plight, so to say, to look at each other and to support.
So they can go together, and development aid is a good means to show that. Okay, thanks, Fatima Zahra. I already told now, I wrote my questions with a red pen. Oh my God. And there's red lights, so... No, I know them by head, but I want to quote it nicely, because 2 weeks ago you wrote a nice sentence on LinkedIn. Namely, you said that solidarity is not only a side need, but it's actually a precondition for peace and stability. Can you explain what you meant with it and why solidarity is essential when we talk about peace and stability?
I think also, just to come back what Alice just said, we have also in our own constitution, Article 90 in the Netherlands, that we have a responsibility for peace and international security. So that's not only from a point of view of a moral duty, but also we have a constitutional duty. And that's also within one part of frame of humanity, but it's also one frame of our own interests, because we need security, we need peace, but we also like international trade for our own economy. So solidarity for me is also very important. That's also the side of international cooperation, because peace and security with hard power, you cannot do it only. You need also development. You need to invest in stability and prevent conflict. You see that, for example, the first signs of conflicts which is going to happen is food insecurity, is the increase of death rate of women giving birth. So there are different kind of signs. And for me, it's as a human being, but also as a country as the Netherlands, we need to have international solidarity to invest in the global south, and not only the poor, but we also need to help with international trade, with our knowledge, to bring these countries to a more stable economy and society. So because now we see a more transactional international affairs, and also the current government, their motto was, we need to look at our interests first. And what I really found also interesting was what you said, sorry, about what happened in Algeria. First we went there for the gas and we didn't look at their interests regarding dairy. Now, you could say now with the point of view of this government, transactional would be better, but we also have to look at the interest of the country, to the human rights standards, to what really is necessary. So at the one hand, sometimes transactional relationship can be good, but for me also the international solidarity should prevail before transactional.
Clear, thanks. And I think that's also why in the same message you advocated for a more integrated policy, bringing together development, diplomacy, trade
Yes.
and different aspects?
Because they are interrelated. Because we can, maybe you're going to ask it later, we can invest only in our military forces, in NATO, the 5%. But, you know, hard power is not going to give you sustainable peace. It's more, you know, cruel power. So you really need to invest in all these elements. They're all interrelated.
So you're against the statement of the VVD to use development money for defense?
Absolutely. It's also very naive. So, yeah, absolutely.
Danielle, your reflections on this? Because in your program you also plea for investing in peace and security, and you state that it's equally important to only investing in defense. How do you reflect on what has been said? What is your specific angle or contribution to?
And maybe a couple of things, because we also, I think our program is based on solidarity as a principle. So not only solidarity within the Netherlands, but also solidarity with people everywhere. And in the case of international cooperation, that for me boils down to we are one of the richest countries in the world. There are major humanitarian and health crises in the world, even aggravated by what USAID is doing. And it's just, and you could call that a moral plight, but you could also say, you know, you have the money, use it to make, to support people everywhere that have less chance of having a certain level of well-being. But also solidarity with people that are in the front line of fighting the climate crisis, challenging their government when it comes down to respecting labor rights or women's rights or indigenous rights. So solidarity for us is a basic driver behind our vision, both for our internal policies as for our foreign policies. And next to that, and I think we all agree with that, it is part of a larger package of what I call in Dutch, I don't even know what the, maybe, okay, we'll find out. I think it's het brede buitenlandbeleid. So if we look at foreign policy, it's not just chunks of budgets that do particular things, but it should be a coherent whole. And I think it helps changing the way we do trade and defining new trade relations, because there are so many countries that we should deepen our trade relations with, and that is not an extractive. You asked the question about neocolonial. It should no longer be an extractive relation, but it should be an equal relationship, and that means also investing in human rights. It means investing in sustainable infrastructure. So if we want to strengthen our trade relations with other countries, we also have to start giving, and not giving as, "Ooh, we are so kind, and we have pity on you." No, making sure that everybody benefits from the trade that we maintain.
Thanks. Yeah, bring it back to the conversation we had before and the remark by someone in the audience. Of course, development aid has also been referred to as a masked transactional or colonial endeavor. And as you also explained, there's also countries happy that, or claiming, saying that they are happy that, development aid is being drastically cut because they don't want this Western interference anymore. How do we deal with that, this quite strong anti-West sentiment, specifically in, the Sahelian countries or more countries? Yeah.
Are you asking?
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, development cooperation has always been a way to change power relations. So with other things, we can do with other policies, but this is to make sure that people that have less political and economic power defend their rights and make sure that they have access to all the richness that is being created. Of course, there are regimes also in other countries that don't appreciate that vision on supporting their opposition. So that's one element. I think it's always necessary to see who is saying what and why. On the other side, I find Western countries, and it's been made more clear now than ever because of what's happening in the Middle East, but hugely hypocritical. So it's of course not true that we're not present in these countries apart from development cooperation. Our companies have been there forever with an extractive relationship, and we're not willing, and I dare agree with the people that criticize the West, we're not willing to stand up to our own standards. So we're not even willing now to maintain CSR laws in the European Union. So as long as we don't live up to our own standards, I fully understand that other countries say that what we do is hypocritical. Now, that's also what these elections are about, in a sense that all these parties have a vision on what our foreign policy should be about. And for us, it's critical to live up to our human rights obligations, that our companies live up to our human rights obligations, and that our trade becomes more focused on creating well-being everywhere instead of just schlepping, this is not again not the right word, moving stuff around the globe and nobody knows for what anymore, and destroying our planet in the meanwhile.
Thanks. Yes, Alice, you're from a party with also a lot of, let's say, farmers. Background audience, supporters, hopefully. When they talk about food security, they often refer to food security in the West, whereas when you talk also about development aid, you're talking about food security in the global South. Is there a tension between the two? Do you see that they can strengthen each other? How do you look at this?
Yeah, I do see that these two are they are connected and they are often used at the same time. Mm-hmm. If we talk about food security here, we often talk about our own supermarkets. Do we have enough food in our supermarkets? Do we have enough materials for our own solar panels, for example? But at the same time, I think we also should look at the food security in countries like in Africa, for example. Do farmers, for example, have enough food? Do countries have enough food to feed their own people? Do they have enough to export to other countries? And I think those concepts are interrelated, and we should use them both. And I think it's actually an opportunity to really look at the win-win situation here. And for example, if you look at the cocoa value chain, the prices are at this moment are much higher than before. You see that, for example, in the Netherlands, we have to pay more. We talk about insecurity of the supply chain. Are we going to get enough cocoa for our own chocolate? At the same time, we see the cocoa farmer that doesn't have enough means to export. That has a very low yield at this moment. And what I think is very important, that we start to really invest our own means, our own knowledge to support the farmer. If we, for example, invest €1, we can make sure that the farmer has €3 instead, because we support the farmer with €1 to increase its productivity. And then you really have the win-win situation. And I don't think we do that enough, but I think we should do that more. Really use our knowledge to support also the productivity, and then you really have the win-win situation if you talk about food security.
And what if countries like indeed Ghana, Ivory Coast decide, well, cocoa is only exported to the West, it doesn't contribute to our food security, let's get out the plantations and invest in, I don't know, local vegetables or...
Well, I totally understand, and I think I think if you look at a lot of crops, if you look at, for example, raw materials, I think we have not invested enough in the country's own productivity. Really, we really, and if you, for example, if you talk about chocolate, what happens with a lot of these raw materials, also the farmers cannot even produce their own chocolate. We really, first it has to go to India, Vietnam, for example, before it goes to Europe. And I think it's very important that we also support the country's own ability to make their own chocolate, for example, because only then it also contributes to the economy. I think we keep a
It
lot
might
of
come with
countries.
losses for companies in the Netherlands, of course.
Yeah, but I think we will find
other.
other ways for our own economy. Yeah.
Thanks. Fatima Zahra, how do you look at, at what has been said here?
Something else came up in my mind, and that's also regarding investing in the economies and of the global south and what they need. And it's also not only the cacao, you know, but what you also see, we in the Netherlands, we are in the top sector of food security. You know, it was just shared with us, we have the knowledge, but we are also producing here different kinds of vegetables and that actually are not here the right place for it, which also prevents other countries in the global south to sell their products, which also could help them building their economies. So, you know, I can buy here a nice zucchini or tomatoes, but it's not with the best flavor. And we are preventing other countries, you know, by exporting them, not only with tariffs, but also within our own Western society. So that's for me also a question, what we are doing. So next to this. And so I think the same as what Daniela said, and I agree with her that we should also look how, you know, we are transferring a lot of food, but also other projects in the world, and what's really necessary. And that will probably, it will hurt us, also the consumers and also our economy. But if you want to go to a fair world, and I know that my party, because it's a discussion also in my party with how you deal with that, but I think we should have a more honest and open discussion about it.
Thanks. Daniela, you want to respond?
Yeah, I do want to respond to this, because I think what you're asking is actually the right question. So what kind of food production do we want? And I think it mirrors what was said in the first panel, that our food system also needs to change, because it makes us unsafe, it's unsustainable. So what we're seeing is what we need to change here is a mirror of what needs to change in order to assure food security in other countries. And I think that is where trade is so interesting, because that's where the question can be solved. If we change the way we look at trade, we can also change the way we look at how we invest in other countries. Yes, it will, you said rightly, there might be, change never is without consequences, but not changing is also not without consequences. So I find it important, the way we maintain our food system, and I think the Netherlands plays a critically negative role in that, the way the food system is now is unsustainable. So it needs to change. If you don't change, you're even bigger. You have even bigger problems. And I think in the question shouldn't be would companies in the Netherlands suffer. First of all, it's often not Dutch companies. It's often multinationals that come from very different places and that are simply based here because we are a main port for bulk imports and exports. It doesn't have to do anything with producing food. It has to do a lot of with producing shampoo and whatever, energy. To focus back on food and then ask the question, what kind of trade do we actually want, is a very inspiring way of looking at the major challenges that we have. Because we need to change, and we can also make sure that our footprint on the rest of the world diminishes. And one of the examples, and that was also from the first panel, is the question about seeds. So yes, the Netherlands has a very innovative seed sector. And in the trade agreements that we still have, we make sure that people you cannot use their own seeds anymore. I mean, this is legally binding trade agreements. So we maintain the UPOF. Yeah, I see people looking at each other. UPOF? No, it's not true. So the UPOF treaty, look it up, makes it very difficult to maintain local seed trade systems. And these are those tiny unknown things that we still keep going, and which, if we take it away, we can also build on knowledge by indigenous local group that we can learn from. So I find it a very inspiring conversation, but only if we agree that we need to change. Because if we don't change, the cost will be way higher than if we do.
Also for security. Thanks. The audience, I'm sure there are questions. I heard a lot of people already talking. The man in the back was first. You want a mic? No. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, on trade, I'm happy you mentioned it, but it's not only seed, it's also feed. Sjoukje in the first panel said we need to diminish our imports of feed. But now two of the parties, I think CDA, D66, I didn't hear the names, but they are supporting this deal, EU-Mercosur, to import even more sugar, meat, poultry and beef, also indirectly feed, because Argentina is going to get rid of export taxes. We have also a deal with Indonesia to get access to more minerals for our electric cars, the same with Chile. So this whole trade, the current trade is based on more extraction. And the man from Nigeria said, what can we do? Not only deliver raw materials. They need to build their own industry. Also, that is prevented by current WTO rules.
So what's your question?
Yeah, so first to CDA D66, why do you support EU-Mercosur while we keep on maintaining our colonial relations with FTAs like that? And also for CEPA with Indonesia.
So both CDA and D66, why do you support unsustainable trade deals, according to the man?
Well, I cannot say much about the Mercosur deal because I don't know it by heart, but I can say something about the Indonesia trade agreements because I know the Indonesia situation from my own experience a bit much better. I think it's very important. I'm currently, maybe for your information, I'm currently still director of CNV International as well. Which works in the supports also labor rights in the nickel sector, and I know from my experience that the nickel sector we use nickel for our own solar panels, wind mills, for example. And I think it's very important, and I also see that it's important to protect also, if you close these trade deals, to also protect the rights of the people. So, for example, labor rights. And I think it's very important that we look, if you make such a trade deal, that you also always find the balance between, of course, otherwise the trade deal will not be made, the balance between the European importance, but also the importance of the people there, and that you really create a win-win situation. And I think it's very important also to work closely with civil society, for example, to protect these rights.
Fatima, how do you?
I don't know much about the Indonesian deal and a little bit about Mercosur, but I can reply from the 66 point of view that we see the same thing with Mercosur, that it should be a win-win situation. It's very important to look at the human rights, labor rights, and also the climate changes. And
so you both feel they are guaranteed in these deals enough?
It's you know, guaranteed. I think it's, you know, I'm a realist, so but there is a standard that that we put there, and I do think that we have to monitor it also. That should be consequences if they are not lived by. But yeah, so
thanks.
Because I can say other things.
Thank you. Anyone a question related to security? Food and security. Oh, Daniela can't...
Yeah, because of course, so this is something that has been debated fiercely in Parliament, the Mercosur Treaty. And I just want to make sure that we know what we're talking about. And I'm looking at my future colleagues, because this is a debate that we're going to have. The Mercosur deal is much more than only agriculture. That we need to understand that, first of all. It doesn't have any guarantees on protecting labor or any other rights, which the CEPA deal has. So this is, it can be done, but in the Mercosur deal, it's not done. But there's other things happening in that treaty, which is, for example, that we are going to export pesticides that we are not allowed to use anymore in Europe. So, but we're going to export them to South America. We have to question ourselves again whether if we want truly equal trade relations that truly as other parties pretend that this deal would do, whether it's really okay if we start exporting stuff to another part of the world that we ourselves find too dangerous to use. And there's so many more questions around this deal. I just want to make sure that we are aware that this is about exporting cars. This is about having parallel justice systems that are totally intransparent while we are dealing with two blocs that have their legal systems fairly okay. So the trade discussion is more than only food, and it's more than only agriculture. And I think the Mercosur deal needs to be looked at from that angle. And we're narrowing it down, to my understanding, way too much to only agriculture, while it's way more than that. And if we want to go into a different route towards more equal trade relations, these are not the kinds of treaties that we want to have. Sorry, I have to say this because...
That's a clear statement. Any question on security, food? Now to you.
So my name is Bibi. I'm project assistant at NABC. I know he also wanted to ask a question, Matthijs. He's also from NABC. So my question is related to security in the sense that how much potential is there to have a link between peace facilitation and sustainable trade relations, specifically because I was at a congress for PvdA GroenLinks, and I remember Danielle saying this in June, that bilateral relations between Africa and the Netherlands are slowly decreasing. So how can there be a sustainable link between peace facilitation, and trade relations, and how can the Netherlands proactively contribute to that? I don't know.
Any specific? The question is to all of the panel members, or?
Yeah, to all.
Oh, okay.
I think that's a very important question. You see in general that the relationship, not only with the Netherlands, but also with other European countries and the Global South are, I wouldn't say deteriorating, but it's being less. Also what earlier was mentioned, the double standards, that we are sometimes still seen, and sometimes also we are, as still acting like colonialists, telling countries what to do, and being harder on them than other countries are. And also when they see how the relationship can be with Russia or China, which have different angles. So we have also to look to ourselves, to reshape how we look at the Global South and these countries, to be more equal partners, but then again also stay in tune with not acting really transactional like Russia and China, and sell and do whatever we want, and lowering our human rights standards. But we do have to reshift the relationship, and I think we were better, but now it's decreasing. So it should be an equal relationship. And that is one of the most important first steps that we have to do.
Thanks. Alice, you want to add?
Yes, a more concrete example. As the Netherlands, we have, for example, had a peace mission in Afghanistan. We have contributed to that. And we used the 3D approach, which means defense, democracy, and development aid. And I think that approach, what was missing out was the trade part. And I think that was a bit neglected, but also the local civil society was not contributing as much in the whole approach. And I think that's very important to see, for example, if you have a peace mission, for example, how is our maybe Dutch or European, how are the companies also contributing to the same development goals? Are they contributing, for example, to youth and employability. And I think it's very important to see that as a more holistic approach and not to neglect it, because sometimes you can be maybe counterproductive if you don't take that as a whole.
So not food of force, but food for force.
Yes.
Daniela, you wanted to add as well.
Yeah, I would like to say that yes, our presence in many of the conversations ongoing, also related to peace, has diminished, and our credibility has diminished significantly. I think the first step would be to make sure that we at least respect international rules and that we agreed on. Amongst others on genocide, amongst others on humanitarian aid. Because if not, we stand to lose all credibility, and I do think that rightly so. Second of all, again, we can contribute to peace by not importing conflict minerals, by not supporting a Rwandan army that is protecting a huge LNG project in Mozambique where we have Dutch interests. So it's not only that we can contribute to peace, we can actually contribute to avoiding conflict by our economic relations and taking seriously the agreements that we have also around that in Europe itself. The point is, we are not handhaving, maintaining is also right. So we are not even respecting our European. We export 50% of our weapons are exported to non-NATO countries. Well, you can imagine where those weapons go and what they are used for. So again, I know this is about food, but if we have so many things within our control that would avoid more conflict and would contribute to peace, and we are not doing them. And I think that's what we have to look at first, and then we can go into the diplomacy and be a part at the table again, because we have something to give there as well.
Clear, thanks. Yes, there's still time. Oh. Now I'll let you select.
Okay. So, so when I came a few days ago, one of my meetings was to meet with Shell. Shell, the big oil and gas company that has devastated the entire Niger Delta in Nigeria. And I realized that on coming that Shell is no longer a Dutch company. So they're now fully the British company. And I'm wondering, as a government, as a people here, and I also feel that Shell still have some level of footprint here, because that transition happened more recently. So what are we doing, or what are you doing in country to see that Shell doesn't just transition away from being Dutch to completely UK or British, but to also be able to be responsible where they've had footprints? You know, to do those cleanups rather than divesting, because what we hear now is that Shell is divesting. It means that they're going offshore and they're doing just logistics. And they've left many decades of operations, devastating the environment and killing livelihoods. People can no longer plant in their homes, in their farmland. So what are we doing, or what did we really do at the time when Shell was still Dutch? And now that they are transitioning, or they've transitioned, are we following up on anything, any remediation around what they have done in the past in the Niger Delta?
So first of all, yes, and the Netherlands, there have been several court cases against Shell brought to court by civil society organizations. The Dutch government has never held Shell accountable. Shell has also damaged the livelihoods of many Dutch people, and not only in the north of the Netherlands, and even there we know from parliamentary inquiries that the government actually stood beside Shell and not beside its own people. It was shocking, honestly, and we're still negotiating as a government with Shell, because they claim now damages because they are having to leave the gas fields alone. So it's just to make sure that we know that what happens in Nigeria, and I think we have to be aware of that as well, is increasingly also happening in the Netherlands. So that's also how we're connected to the rest of the world. Now, Shell has left the Netherlands. I personally I'm not sad about that. It had a huge influence on our sustainability policies. And it left not because of that, but because they were not able to deduct taxes anymore. So they left to the UK, which is a huge tax haven. And that was the reason they left. So just to know how that company thinks. While the Dutch government had supported them throughout decades. So what we're doing now is, I think we're fighting, and that's not the government as opposition parties, to stop fossil support. We got a long way with that, so embassies are not allowed to work anymore with supporting fossil fuel companies. I don't know whether that's changed actually around this extreme right, but that's the way, that's we can do with government policies. No more fossil support, no more export support, trying to, and also trying to support the sustainable energy companies, truly sustainable energy companies, so that they can compete with the fossil fuel companies that refuse to change anything. That's what my government would do if I were in government. Now we see, of course, that European and the EU and my government as well at the moment is getting away from those sustainability ambitions. So we're not going in the right direction, but we know what to do if we get a new chance.
Thanks. Yeah, I think we have time for one last question. Yeah.
Sorry, this gentleman.
I'm Gerrit Vermeer from. I was here for years. 5 years. I was PUM expert. So I have a lot of experience about agriculture in hot countries. What I'm missing was the transfer of practical knowledge between the farmers in the countries. Mm-hmm. That is. We have a policy that we have we need profit from our companies in the Netherlands and to making to give aid help from that basis. But the problem is that that is high level knowledge. The problem is how we can transfer the easy knowledge, practical knowledge to the farmers. And that is what you have for pesticides, for everything, for the land use, for higher production, the right seeds. If we use right seeds from the Dutch companies, that seeds are not sometimes compatible with the climate in low level countries.
So your question is how the Dutch can support indeed more, say, farmer-farmer exchange or South-South exchange of knowledge.
I think research stations, local research stations, and then you share the knowledge. I think that is the way.
Yes, Reflector. Thanks, Les. What is your take on that?
Thank you for the question, and good to know that there's a real PUM expert in the room here. I know PUM from my own experience, of course, also from the trade union perspective. But I know we actually do quite a lot as the Netherlands currently still on supporting farmers with their own knowledge. It's not only PUM, but it's also with help of Agriterra, for example, but also other civil society organizations like Cordate and Oxfam Novib support smaller farmers. So I think it's very important to use the knowledge and also to use the links that we have with universities, for example, like Wageningen University. And a very good initiative that I support is the policy from the Netherlands to support in specific countries. Dutch knowledge, for example, in Ghana, the Netherlands is currently supporting the tuinbouw sector, the horticulture sector, with Dutch companies, Dutch knowledge, universities, trade unions, and so on, and have a really holistic approach. I think it's very important to continue that.
Thank you.
Yes, and just short also, I agree with that. And I think it's important that we, continue with also the Dutch diamond approach, which show this. which this government actually stepped down. They really, are cutting a lot of budget on it. So that cooperation to strengthen each other with, farmers, scientists, NGOs, and the governments, that connection is really needed.
Thanks. I was yesterday at a meeting and they were advocating for decolonized Dutch diamonds. So maybe that could be a nice conclusion of this session. I want to thank you all for your attention and a big applause to, the Parliament members. Thank you.